Excavation work and underground work safety. Excavation work and underground safety planning. Many civil and industrial engineering works such as excavations for foundations, hydraulic, road and railway constructions include excavation works and the movement of soil and rocks as preliminary activities or as integral parts of the realization of the works themselves. Excavation and underground operations are among the most hazardous construction works and are more likely than others to result in worker fatalities. For this reason, all actors involved in those kinds of activities shall enter the job site only after adequate protections are in place to address cave-ins and other excavation-related incidents. It seems more than important to correctly address the planning of the safety in this activity field. In most cases, accidents are caused by proceedings and/or behaviors marked by scarce or superficial attention. Sometimes the dynamics of land mechanics are carried out without the provision and adoption of the necessary security measures by the operators, both passive and active. Very often there are planning responsibilities, but also economic, financial, when, for example, the auction discount causes cuts to the detriment of security, implementation, as well as verification and control. When planning an excavation job, it is crucial to know as much as possible about the job site, the materials, soils and other factors which may affect the possibility of a safe work performance. First of all, the overall mechanical behavior of each terrain can be evaluated by a competent person, from the level and type of cohesion that characterizes its components. Indeed, the cohesion of a terrain is the ability to resist detraction efforts. From a practical descriptive point of view and in accordance with the international specialized literature, such as Bureau of Reclamation and Engineers Corps of the United States of America Soil Mechanics SI version, Lamb and Whitman MIT 1979, HRBAASHO, or also the CNR Uni 10006, 1963. It is possible to make a first distinction between rocks properly said, characterized by a remarkable mechanical resistance, and sand. Before starting the excavation operations, the company responsible person shall check that the personal protection devices have been provided to workers and, in particular, helmet, shoes with imperforable sole and steel points, gloves, protective clothing, phosphorescent garments in case of poor visibility, protective glasses in case of projection of splinters or fragments. Carry out an inspection to identify the exact location of all underground utilities, environmental conditions, buildings, roads, trees, weather, etc. that can determine risk situations. Assess the actual specific risk related to possible situations linked to environmental and human factors, presence of dangerous atmospheres or presumed lack of oxygen in the excavation, difficult conditions of access and exit from the excavation site. Draw up a specific operational safety and emergency plan in accordance with the national OS legislation, without forgetting to identify a responsible person. The latter will be in charge of preparing a plan for the management of any emergency situation related to the peculiarities of the construction site. It is important that the indications to be followed in the event of an emergency are immediately visible and easy to understand, where required. Plan a training or informative session for workers on processing techniques adopted, on individual and collective protection systems, and on safety and rescue procedures to be followed in the event of an emergency. These activities should be repeated every time an internal control, carried out by the manager of the worker by the supervisory authorities, highlights shortcomings in the relevant knowledge or following the introduction of new equipment, technologies, dangerous substances, etc. The accomplished training should be noted in a special register with the specification of the program carried out, the date of interventions, the names of the trainers and the participating workers. The questions and recommendations for preventing the occurrence of risk. In order to guarantee the safety of workers, the technical manager, O's responsible person, shall check during the first and subsequent visits to the job site the adequacy of the security measures set up. For instance, with reference to the following questions: A. Does the work concern a trench or an open pit? B. Is the excavation more than 1.5 meters deep? C. Is there the presence of water in the excavation? D. Are there adequate and safe means for the entry and exit of workers in the excavation site? E. Are there walkways of the right width, equipped with parapets to cross the excavation? F. Is vehicular traffic present in the immediate vicinity of the excavation site? G. Are there any buildings near the excavation site? H. Are the excavation vehicles equipped with acoustic warning signals? I. Is there a competent technician present during the works? J. Are there adequate procedures in place for the identification of dangerous substances inside the excavation? K. Has the type of excavated soil been preliminarily determined by a competent expert? L. Is the excavation ground placed at a distance of at least 1 meter from the edge of the ladder? M. If hand ladders are in use as a way to get out of the excavation, are these reachable within a radius of 10 meters? N. Is the documentation of previous OS controls available to the excavation site in object? In general, it is important to bear in mind a number of recommendations which constitute a good cultural basis for preventing the occurrence of risk. 1. No one can establish with absolute certainty that an excavation site is safe and that no type of armor should be prepared. 2. Fatal or extremely serious accidents can occur even if the worker is not completely submerged from the ground. Workers buried only up to the walls do unfortunately decease as a consequence of the strong pressure exerted on the body from the ground. 3. The excavations carried out near previous excavations are particularly dangerous as the terrain has little compactness. 4. The presence of water increases the possibility that the excavation may collapse. The increase in water pressure in the soil can be the factor determinant for possible landslides in the excavation walls. 5. Clay can be extremely dangerous if dried by the sun. Large blocks of rocks can fall from the walls of the trench afterwards have been stable for long periods of time. 6. The frozen walls of an excavation should not be considered as alternatives to support structures. 7. The excavation must be considered as a space confined within to monitor and verify that workers are not exposed to substances dangerous. 8. The support structures of the excavations must always take into account the additional loads determined by the weight of the ground accumulated at the edges of the trench, of vehicular traffic, of other adjacent structures, etc. 9. When a worker or part of a car or construction equipment is located at a distance of less than 3 meters from an underground electric line or air, contact the supply company in order to continue jobs. 10. The supporting works must always be carried out according to the layouts prepared by a competent technical manager. 11. The uprights, panels, struts used for the supporting works must always be dimensioned according to the conditions of the ground, of the depth and width of the trench. 12. No worker must work in the trenches outside the support armor. Finally, it should be considered that the use of new techniques can contribute to improve prevention. Indeed, prevention also means researching new solutions and working techniques alternatives to traditional ones, being able to combine risk reduction and improving the competitiveness of companies. The use of modern techniques for the installation of service networks, for example, the so-called no-dig, realize a significant reduction in risks. The site will always be built with related issues, but the serious risk of burial and/or fall in the excavation is eliminated. Used for laying gas, water and service distribution networks. Telephone. It allows to avoid the typical problems of construction sites in inhabited areas and city historians. In fact, It allows to limit most of the inconveniences and have easily overcome geological, hydrogeological and other difficulties connected to the presence of road infrastructures, railways, roads, bridges, sewerage. These new technologies also make it possible to extend the life of the pipes already in place within situ maintenance operations, without having to dismantle what is above these buried services.